Man, I love that song.
It is so good. It's so chilling, right?
I know.
And such a great rendition of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that is not our normal intro song. It's not nearly as cool as that.
It would be kind of weird if that was our normal intro song.
That actually would be. It'd be a very depressing podcast.
Yeah, right? It'd be a very sad podcast.
But that is the Song of Persephone from the book that we were talking about, Red Rising. Song was actually the rendition was by Lauren Conklin, who we really love the rendition, and we're really grateful that she allowed us to use it to open and kind of play throughout the episode, because it's a beautiful done. So you can find all of her information in our show notes. We'll link to her YouTube page. She does a lot of violin covers. She's got this Lord of the Rings one that's really awesome. So
I love that one.
You gotta go check her out.
Yeah. And if that opening song doesn't get you excited for the topic tonight, nothing's gonna do it.
Nothing's gonna do it. But anyways, I'm Nelson.
Oh, hey, Nelson. I'm Dalton.
Hey, how you doing, Dalton?
I'm doing really good.
Yeah, I'm excited.
We have a lot in store this episode.
We do.
This is a big one.
Yeah, it really is. So we got two special guests.
We do. Two special guests.
We get to talk about one of our favorite books of all time, Red Rising.
Yep.
And we get a little preview with our special guest of a new board game that's coming out. So it's kind of a combined episode.
I know.
We got all of our pillars. We got the book Red Rising, the board game Red Rising, and then we are also drinking, which are our other two pillars. You want to hop into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
who's starting out tonight?
I'll start you out.
Okay, start me out.
So I brought you a beer. I brought you.
You did. I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. I brought you a bourbon barrel. Or the name. The name is very descriptive. I brought you bourbon barrel aged albino white stout from Horny Goat Brewing.
It gets less descriptive as you go on.
Yeah, but more interesting.
Yeah, but more interesting. That's a good point.
So we've had one other Horny Goat beer on this episode
right.
in our Welcome To episode, which was almost about a year ago is what you were saying.
Yeah,
so that's kind of
it
fun.
released on April 9th of 2020, and we're releasing this one on April 8th, 2021,
that's awesome.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So the albino white stout from Horny Goat. Horny Goat is a Plainfield brewery, which is a local brewery here. It looks like a pale ale. Right?
Yeah, it really does.
So the white stout is kind of interesting. The SRM is about a 13, which is also described as like, I don't know, I would say it's like a copper.
Yeah.
Like you could mask elementic powers around you while you're drinking it or something.
Wrong book episode, but yes.
Oh, shoot, yeah. Oh, that's why I have my notes open. But yeah, so the white stout is...
It definitely is a surprising color for a stout. Like
yes.
I poured it and was like, that's not right.
That's not right. They bottled this wrong.
Exactly.
So white stouts get their flavor from chocolate and coffee. More so than like the roasted malt that you would normally see in a stout.
Okay.
And so I think what you were saying is that you taste a lot of coffee in this one.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's very coffee forward. And there is like a chocolate undertone. But
okay.
Like when you smell it, you're like, that smells like a cup of black coffee.
Yeah, that's a cup of black coffee.
Yeah.
But typically that roasted malt is what gives it its dark flavor.
Gotcha.
And so when you remove that, you actually do get a beer that looks like an IPA or a pale ale or something like that. It's kind of interesting. It smells and it should kind of taste more smooth or like a stout. So you may still get some of that, but it's not what you're expecting whenever you're drinking it. So
yeah, I can see what you mean where when you say it's lacking the malt, like it's lacking a lot of the sweetness. I think it tastes more like, it's interesting. It tastes more like black coffee than black stouts do, which is a little disorienting.
Yeah. But yeah. So I picked it up. It's another bourbon aged beer, which I actually didn't know. So it was just I just saw albino white stout. I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've been spoiling me with these. Yeah, you've been spoiling me with these bourbon aged beers.
Yeah, I really have. But so this one was aged in a bourbon barrel for about 6 months. So it's not quite a straight bourbon aged beer.
Yeah.
If that's a term. Like I think you're supposed to get like 2 years, right? Is what you said?
Right. Yeah, straight is 2 years. Yeah, for a bourbon. Yeah.
But that one spent about 6 months in a in a bourbon barrel. So
cool. Awesome.
So that's what it is. The albino white stout doesn't look like one, but it may taste like one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Like I said, the coffee and like a chocolate undertone are very forward. I think I was a little surprised to hear that it was like bourbon barrel aged, which is maybe a little bit disappointing. You know, like I was like, I tasted
you don't have it.
Yeah, I'm not really picking it up. Like maybe in the aftertaste, I kind of get it. I wonder like what, because this I haven't had really. Maybe I've had one white stout before, but it's definitely not something I've drank a lot of. So I kind of wonder what it would have tasted like without the bourbon barrel.
Oh, interesting.
Aging.
I think they have one. They actually have one. So Horny Goat. I was looking up this, and there's not a lot of information out about this one.
Okay.
So
kind of a specialty.
Yeah. But I was looking it up. They have a Horny Goat white stout.
Okay.
Which is, or they have a Horny Goat albino white stout, but not bourbon barrel aged, and that one's significantly more popular.
Gotcha.
So your wish just came true.
It did, yeah. I can try it. I can try it and compare. So I do like it. I like the strong coffee flavor. I like that it's a little quirky as a beer. I might
interesting.
I might describe it like it's in that like I think I'm describing it that way because it's just not what you expect. Like you pour something, you're like, is this a stout? Like you said, it looks like a pale ale, but it does not taste like a pale ale, and it tastes different than a stout. So it's a very different experience than standard beers in that sense. I think for me, I'm going back and forth between a 2 and a 3. I think I would probably land it at a 2 cheers.
Okay.
And I would probably want to try the regular white stout, if I saw it, just to, mostly again kind of for the comparison.
Yeah. So 2 cheers because it's not, you can't taste that bourbon barrel in it.
Right.
It would be a 3 cheers if it wasn't described as a bourbon barrel aged.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Exactly. And partly because like I don't know the price point, but typically bourbon barrel beers are more expensive, and I feel like if it's going to like charge that I want kind of like a more
I gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like a more delicate or more intricate, I guess is a better word, experience.
Not just overpowering with
right,
coffee.
not just overpowering coffee.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So I'm still very much enjoying it, but I think also like if I was going to look for a beer like this, I might just try bourbon barrel aged regular stouts, instead of like this specific white one, because I think it's like you said, it's kind of maybe overpowering.
It's a pint, so you got a lot of it. So
I know, right? Yeah. The can doesn't actually list like the alcohol volume, so it's a bit of a mystery. How drunk am I going to get?
It's like one of those mystery boxes that you buy at Gen Con or something. It's like 3 games. Right. Dalton's gonna be either tipsy or hammered. We'll see.
We'll see.
I'm excited to see where you end up.
Yeah, right.
What am I drinking?
Yeah, you were drinking Russell's Reserve. So I realized actually after I bought this, I was like, we've had a lot of bourbons, like which I know like it
is our title.
Yeah, it is in the title, like, and so I'm supposed to be exploring the realms of it. Like we're definitely continuing that. But I do try to like mix up your experience and throw in some rye and everything.
I
so
appreciate that.
We've been on a bourbon kick, and so this will hopefully next time I'll find something that's not a bourbon. But I've been wanting to try Russell's Reserve, and so this is Russell's Reserve 10-year. Which is it's a small batch, so we've had a lot of conversation around small. So you can kind of compare this probably to like Elijah Craig in like price point and taste. I think it's a nice kind of like variety pick if you've had a lot of Four Roses recently, a lot of Elijah Craig, something like that. This is Wild Turkey's version that kind of like competes at that price point.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Russell's is the name of like two. I think it's a father and son, which is why it's like 2 Russells, a father and son from like the Wild Turkey distillery family. And so they put this together from 10-year barrels from the Wild Turkey kind of like stock of barrels.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what makes it a small batch. They kind of try and mix to get like this consistent flavor. For this specific one that we're drinking, I got kind of like in the nose, like I think actually, first of all, overall, it's a very like quintessential like bourbon-y bourbon. Like,
it's a bourbon.
It's a bourbon. Like you taste it and it's not messing around with being. I think it's like a 75% corn mash.
Okay.
With like, I think the remainder something like barley and rye. And so it's just giving it a little bit of flavor and complexity, but mostly what's coming across is like, caramel, oak, like flavors that you totally expect from a bourbon.
Yeah, that's interesting. I agree. It is a bourbon's bourbon. Like that, I mean, like if you've ever had a bourbon, boil it down to its base form, and this is what you're kind of tasting.
Yeah.
I think that when I didn't realize until you just compared it to like the Elijah Craig. And so that's an interesting comparison that I want to make, because I think that Elijah Craig is a little bit more complex than this is.
Okay.
This one feels a little jarring, especially for like it's not a super high APV, and it's around the same price point. I'm kind of always go back to comparing it to a Templeton if it's a rye, or Elijah Craig if it's a small batch or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I did water this one down, and I've never watered down Elijah Craig. I don't know. The alcohol flavor seems to be significantly more there.
Okay.
Which I guess I also kind of think that of Wild Turkey.
I think so too. Yeah.
It's just like that's just kind of what you get when you don't really care.
Right.
I don't know if that's actually true. It's just my history. So maybe that's what's kind of contributing to that flavor. But I definitely don't think that I would really pick this over an Elijah Craig, especially if it's the same price point. So
right.
In that sense, it's probably a 2 cheers. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's not going to be something that I completely avoid at all costs. Like, I'm probably going to drink this and then one more tonight, right? I'm not going to say no.
Yeah. I think that's totally fair. It has a very strong flavor profile. Like it comes through almost like thick, I think, in the flavor profile, which is why I think I kind of recommended to you to water it back a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm like kind of on par with you. Like it's a name that I see all the time. I was like, I kind of want to give this one a try. It's in the mid tier, like small batch. Like it's going to compete with Elijah Craig. I think I'm with you that like it's the official bourbon of the Fantasy and Select podcast. Like we just really like Heaven Hill, Elijah Craig. So I think Elijah Craig would win over it, but I think that it's a nice kind of like variety pick if I've had a lot.
I would agree with that.
You know, it's like let's branch out a little bit and try something that's just slightly different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Okay, so you want to hop into our special minds section?
Oh, I do.
So,
I do. This is a treat.
This was really exciting. We have already recorded this, so we're going to drop it in. But we did get to talk to Jamey Stegmaier and Alex Schmidt, who are the co-designers of the Red Rising board game that is coming out soon.
Yep, from Stonemaier Games.
From Stonemaier Games. Good point. Which is coming out soon if you're in the United States. If you're in Europe, I don't want to talk to you because you've been playing this for a couple weeks.
We have a lot of listeners. Oh, because they already have had the chance to play it.
Yeah, they've been playing it for a few weeks and they keep posting
right.
about it on Instagram, and I get jealous.
That's fair. Yeah, Nelson's jealous of you, EU listeners.
But we were really excited to have them on to discuss both the board game and a little bit of the book. So if you have not read the book and you're here to listen about the board game, we do make a distinct note in our conversation where we explicitly say, if you have not read the book, we recommend you drop off now.
Yeah.
So that's towards the end. So enjoy Jamey Stegmaier and Alex Schmidt.
Yeah. You know, we know this is a book episode. If you're listening to this for just the strict Red Rising content, we really do recommend that you go ahead and listen through this portion because we are spending a significant portion of it talking about probably roughly half or so talking about the book. And it's one of Jamey's favorites. It's one of Alex's favorites, and they have some really good things to say about it. So we're really excited for this to kind of like kick off this discussion with the two of them.
Absolutely. Awesome. So we're now here with Alex and Jamey from Stonemaier Games. How are you doing, guys?
Yeah,
I'm doing great.
Yeah, great to be here.
Good to be here.
So Jamey is the president of Stonemaier, and Alex is an employee of Stonemaier. Is that correct?
Correct. The director of sales.
Okay, awesome. So the director of sales, awesome title. And so you guys just put out an awesome game, which is kind of why we asked you to come on the podcast, all about Red Rising. You want to give like a quick, brief overview, and then we can talk about Stonemaier a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So Red Rising, the game is obviously based off of the book. It is a 1 to 6 player card and board game that involves it's a hand building game. So you have a hand of cards and you are trying to develop the best hand of cards you can while playing cards on the board and picking them up, and you're manipulating different things on the board as you're doing so.
Yeah, so I mean, the basic thing that you're doing in the game, like Alex said, you start out with a random hand of cards, and over the course of the game, you are often on your turn getting rid of a card and then adding one to your hand, all building towards what you hope will be a great hand at the end of the game. And we designed this to appeal ideally to gamers who like deep decisions in games, but also to people who like readers who follow your podcast, who have read books but haven't played a lot of modern games, that the game will still be welcoming to them because what you're doing on your turn is so simple.
Yeah, I have not yet played the game. I'm eagerly awaiting it to arrive at my doorstep. So this episode will release on April 6th, and so we're hoping to get it at some point this month. But I have watched a couple of streams. So like I know the Charity Board Gamer has done a couple of streams with Red Rising, and it looks awesome. It just, the art is phenomenal.
It's so fun always when you have a game that it like means so much to you thematically to like see all of your favorite characters implemented, right? So it definitely has that that draw, like you said, to the listener base who's like, oh, there's Darrow and there's Severo and there's all these characters that I love.
And we worked with artists, in particular, Justin and Miles are artists who were big fans of the books before they became artists for the game. And so it was very easy to provide art direction for them because I could just say, draw Darrow for me. And they already had a picture in their head of what Darrow looked like, and they could put that on paper. So it was exciting to me every time I got a new illustration to see what one of these characters looked like.
Yeah, it just sounds like a lot of passionate people were working on this project. So I'm excited. I'm excited to get it into my hands. But since this is a book episode, a lot of our listeners may not know the name Stonemaier Games, whereas it's a huge name in the board game industry. So can you give us a brief history of what Stonemaier Games is and how it came to be started?
Sure, I can do that. Alex is probably going to answer a lot of these questions about Red
Yes.
Rising, but I started the company, so I'll answer this one. I co-founded Stonemaier Games back in 2011, 2012 with a Kickstarter project for a game called Viticulture. And since then, over the years, we went from being a very small Kickstarter-driven company to a slightly bigger company that doesn't use Kickstarter anymore. We just create a few games, a few expansions for games every year, and we release them both directly through our website and to hobby game retailers around the world in a variety of different languages. And that's our main focus. I am both a designer and a developer and a publisher for our games. And we try to focus on games that play from about 45 minutes to 90 minutes, and that ideally bring joy to people and capture their imaginations.
Yeah, I think you do a great job of that. So you said that you co-founded it
Nice.
in 2011. That's correct?
Yeah, 2011 is when I started working on the game that I put on
Okay.
Kickstarter in 2012, and that's when I started collaborating with my co-founder Alan
Okay.
Stone.
And so I guess this is a question both for you, Jamey, and you, Alex. How long have you been designing games?
For me, I've done things like growing up. There were always elements of designing games and things like that. But seriously, designing games, I started in 2016. Though Red Rising is the first game that I've designed that's actually being published.
And I think I met Alex around that time because we run an event called the Stonemaier Games Design Day, where we host designers from around the country who come to this event in St. Louis and showcase their prototypes and playtest their prototypes. And I don't know if it was exactly in 2016, but it was around then that Alex showed up at Design Day, and I had a great time meeting him and his wife, and they joined my gaming group, and eventually Alex joined the company. And I've been designing, Alex, you can add to that in a second, but I've been designing games my entire life, both as a kid and then as an adult, starting with that game in 2011, Viticulture. Alex, did I get the timeline right?
Yeah, it is. It was the Design Day. I think it was September of 2016, and that was the first time we met.
So I'll keep that in mind when I'm, doing my next job search. That the best way to get in is to join your boss's game night.
I mean, I highly recommend it. It's networking, right? It's networking with the intention of adding value to the other person, not to get a job necessarily, but that's opportunities come out of that.
So over this long history, I think of it as long. I think Dalton and I have thrown back and forth some ideas, but we've never kind of really gone into it really to actually design a game. But we have our ideas, and then it's a end of the night discussion, and then that's kind of where it starts. But so what kind of brings you pride, or what's been your favorite moment in your game design journey?
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, my favorite moment is definitely seeing people playing Red Rising, especially I haven't seen people play the finished game of Red Rising in person yet, but even seeing it online, seeing people playing it, seeing people excited about the game. The number of comments, whether it's a Facebook group or Twitter or Board Game Geek comments, just about people getting excited about the combos and the ways the game is making their brain think and bringing them joy. There's nothing like that.
Oh, I bet that sounds amazing. To read about the thing that you have created, that you have built online, about other people talking about it, that just seems surreal almost.
Right. From a book perspective, I imagine it's like publishing a book and having people excited about your world and wanting to ask you questions and know more about your world.
Yeah, totally. What about you, Jamey?
Yeah, I mean, that's up there for me. I design games because I want to bring joy to other people. So when I see them express that excitement, whether it's in person or it's on social media, that just means the world to me. And Red Rising is particularly nice because you're building a hand of cards. It's very easy to take a photo at the end of the game of your final hand of cards. So we've seen a lot of fun photos of people building these interesting combos. And it's wonderful to see. It's still because I'm also a publisher, and Alex is now tied to the publishing company as director of sales. I am super happy to see those photos now, but I'm also anxious because I want everyone to have the game. And you guys are waiting to have the game. Everyone in the US is waiting to have the game. Everyone in Canada is waiting, and they are jealously watching people in Europe and Australia and New Zealand showcase their photos. So until everyone has their game, I will anxious, and then everyone has it, then I'll be able to fully embrace those fun moments, those fun photos.
Yeah, we are friends with a lot of people from Europe on Instagram and through everything, and I'm so jealous every time I see. I don't scroll through Instagram as often as I do, just because I'm no, I can't do it right now. But so this is a great transition. So let's talk about the game a little bit. So what what kind of made you, and we've kind of talked about the game because when it was announced, it's one of our favorite books of all time. It was featured very heavily on our top 5 books of all time episode. And so when we saw that there was a game that was coming out about this, we were very hyped, right? So we've talked about it. We've talked about it a little bit, but now that we have you guys on, we're excited to hear you talk about it. So what made you want to design a game around the Red Rising theme?
Jamey, you're first on this one.
I should probably start with, I discovered the Red Rising book back in 2014 when it came out, and I've read every other book like the week that it came out, all 5 books in the series. And so it's been a long journey for me of loving the books and reaching out to Pierce multiple times, not bugging him, but just letting him know, hey, I'm here and I want to design a game in this world. I love this world. So it's been my intellectual property of choice that I've wanted to design a game for a long, long time. And I think a big reason that the books captured me, aside from the wonderful world building and the plot, the story, all that is wonderful. But I love the interesting, difficult decisions that the characters face. There's so many interesting decisions that they make, and rarely are the decisions like just objectively good or bad. They're making tough decisions that, depending on your perspective, are good or bad. And I love that, and I wanted to capture that. Eventually, when I got the chance to design the game and co-design it with Alex, I wanted to capture that in the game itself. Alex's journey started a little bit later. Alex, you want to share how you got into it?
Yeah, so for me, it was interacting with Jamey about this game that he wanted to design and was struggling to get right. I've story and world building has always been just very important to me. It's something that I get passionate about. So seeing Jamey trying to make this game about this world and have it fit with this world made me want to interact with him about that. And we did, before I was ever a designer of this game, we were interacting about his struggles, him trying to figure it out, like at the weekly game night. And so there was this, basically I got to piggyback on Jamey's passion for the Red Rising. I didn't actually read the books until we had kind of come up with an idea, and then I read through them, the first trilogy back to back before we ever started touching anything with the actual design. But we had an idea in place before I ever read them.
So talk me through a little bit then, because you brought up a good point about trying to capture the decisions that the characters have to make, and I can see if you're going to focus on Red Rising as a theme that you could just do like book 1 and you could just do the Institute or something, right? Like that could be like a major theme, or it could be a very like political or interpersonal type game that's going on. So when you were thinking through how do I capture this, what kind of led you to the almost kind of the hand building aspect that you landed on?
Well, let me mention what I tried and failed, what didn't work, and then Alex can tell you what we came to that did work. Yeah. Because the first 4 versions of the game that I designed were games where I was trying to capture too much. I was trying to capture the entire society and the societal structure in the world. And I was also, I think, maybe a little bit too focused on specific story moments, specific plot moments. And I realized 2 things. One, that I wanted the game to appeal to people who hadn't read the Red Rising books. I didn't want the game to spoil anything for them. I didn't know how to do that yet, but I realized I needed to move away from those plot points, those story points. I wanted to bring them into the world, invite them into the world, but not spoil anything. And then the other side of it is that in all these versions of the game, often they involved worker placement or bag building, meeple building. And they involved you kind of looking down at this world from an almost godlike perspective. And the golds in the world kind of do share that perspective. So I thought, okay, maybe this is the way to go. You're a gold and you're looking down at this world that you're manipulating and playing the pieces of. But it felt too distant. I felt detached from the world when I was trying to design the game that way. And that's where I kind of stopped. I tried that over and over again, and it just didn't resonate. It didn't feel like I was making tough decisions with the characters in the world. It felt like I was just moving pawns around the table. And I didn't think that was good enough. I really wanted the theme to be captured in the game. And so then Alex, why don't you take it from here and show them how we came to the final version?
Yeah, so it happened during game night. We were playing a filler game called Fantasy Realms, and we've been talking specifically recently about the different colors and how many different colors there are in Red Rising, and how hard it is to, just from the perspective of taking those 14 colors and having them all mean something. But playing Fantasy Realms has, I think, 10 different suits of cards. And that was in like a 72 card deck. And it worked. And so that's kind of like Red Rising is heavily inspired by Fantasy Realms as a game. And so seeing that and be like, okay, well, this works. Why can't we do this and build a meteor game on top of this. And that's where kind of the entire inspiration for the gameplay started.
And where the tough decisions in the game end up, like tough decisions that the characters make in the book end up resonating in the game, is that this system of removing a card from your hand and putting it out on the table on a location where other players can grab it for themselves, that in itself is a tough decision. Which card am I getting rid of? Which character am I saying, I no longer want you in my crew, you're out of the crew? And which one are you bringing into your house? Which one are you saying, I want you here, you are valuable to me? That is, it really is. I mean, I play the game so many times at this point. It still is a tough decision every time I do that, because I love these characters and I love each card has a way that it can be very powerful. But you have to just say, okay, you are not right for me right now. This other character is.
And so if I understand the game mechanics correctly, you play a card for an effect, but if you have them in your hand at the end of the game, then it's worth victory points. Is that do I understand that correctly?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have talked about this, and Dalton knows that I love like multi-use cards, and those decisions on do I want to use this for the power and give up the X amount of victory points is the type of decision in a game that I enjoy the most. And so that's why I'm really looking forward to this, because it's not a complicated decision. It's a very complex decision where it's like I can play this or I can keep it. And that's just kind of, what I just love. So I'm really excited to see that. So you said that it was a 45 to 90 minutes, kind of what you shoot for design-wise in a game. Is this on the 45 or the 90-minute scale?
Definitely the 45 minutes. I've heard people saying that a 2-player game, they're averaging 20 to 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Which
that's awesome.
I could believe, depending on how much you agonize over those decisions.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we aim for a slightly lower player time is again to be welcoming to people who aren't used to playing 2-hour modern hobby games. So yeah, we wanted it to be welcoming for them, for if they only have 30 minutes at the end of the night, 45 minutes at the end of the night to play a game.
For sure. I want to ask a question real quick on just stepping back. So you're talking about, okay, I'm gonna play this card for its effect, which I need, or I want it out of my hand in terms of scoring. And then you also mentioned that another player can kind of like pick that card up. So do you find that kind of third element of like, can I afford to play this card? Can I afford to allow someone else to pick this up or give this opportunity? Does that kind of play into that decision as well?
Oh yeah, it definitely does. Especially people are talking about the cards where you get other cards. So you play a card and that lets you increase your hand size, which is powerful. But if you do that, you're giving the person next to you the opportunity to pick up that same card, and then on their following turn, they can get an additional card.
Right.
So it seems like within groups, there's a pretty big difference from one group to another, whether people tend to play those cards and let someone else get the benefit, or to get rid of or bury or hold on to those cards so that no one gets the benefit.
And every time you play a card, not only are you giving it a chance for someone else to get it, but oftentimes you're putting that card on top of another card. And so you're covering up a card that someone else could have access to. So
gotcha.
if I know that Alex just played a great green card, I don't want anyone else to have it. Maybe I'm hoping that it gets back to me on a future turn, or I could probably grab it that turn, but maybe I just want to cover it up. I could put a card on top of it, and that prevents other players from getting it until they take that card on top. There are other ways to manipulate that, but you're always kind of thinking about which card am I playing, where am I playing it, and which card am I covering up by playing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun decisions. So this is a book episode. So we are right after this, we're going to be talking all about Red Rising, the magic or the technology systems in Red Rising, the world building, and all of that. So I do want to talk about Red Rising with you all. The book. So at this point, if you're listening and you have not read Red Rising, I would recommend that you go ahead and hop off, because we are going to be talking about the first book, The Red Rising, which is a trilogy, but the first book is called Red Rising. That's what we're going to be talking about, and there may be spoilers that we talk about. And so at this point, go ahead and pause or hop off and then read it and then come back. So, no, absolutely not. So with that being said, let's talk about the book a little bit. The book, we've kind of everyone at this point has read the book, so they know what it is. We don't have to summarize it for them. But I want to kind of let's just start out with one of my favorite questions whenever we're talking about a book, because especially a book like this, because there are a lot of characters. Who is your favorite character? Who do you connect with? Who do you feel is well written?
Yeah, this is so hard with this series. There are so many characters who are so good, and they're all very present. Like sometimes you read a book and there's a lot of characters that are kind of all the samey, or that don't have enough distinct personality. But everyone in Red Rising has a distinct, like unique personality. You know who they are. You have feelings about them. But if I had to pick, I would probably pick Mustang, which is a little bit of the. I feel like it's a little bit like the world peace pageant response, but it's, I appreciate her desire to work things out between people, and just her overall sense of goodness that is less lost, I think, than it is sometimes for other characters.
Yeah, I think you bring a good point there about the diversity that he's able to bring, especially like when you consider that he had to typecast the character already, right, by assigning them a color.
Yeah.
Right. So like the gold is going to be noble or whatever, and the reds are going to be fiery and passionate and angry, and so he has to already kind of give them that very forward emotion or disposition or whatever, and then the ability to still give detail and nuance to like all these golds that you meet throughout the Institute, for instance. The difference between Cactus and Severo and Mustang. And it's like those are three entirely different characters, but they all still meet the criteria for gold. So I think it's a real accomplishment.
What about you, Jamey?
It's difficult. There's a character that shows up later. I don't think appears in book one that I would typically say is my favorite, a guy named Ragnar. But I have the most fun reading like the big, like the oversized personality and oversized body characters like Pax and later Ragnar.
Yeah.
I just have, I don't know, they just I like the way that Pierce writes them. I just have fun whenever they're on their page. And then kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, Severo, who is not big, but he is clever and wily, and I have a lot of fun reading whenever Severo shows up on the page too.
Yeah, I think Dalton and I are pretty in sync that Severo is our favorite character.
I think it's been well established in previous. I've named Severo as like one of my favorite characters like all time.
Yeah.
And he just grows throughout the series. So what a great character.
Yeah. But yeah, two characters that'll make you smile at least in the first book are definitely Pax and Severo. Both of them have really funny moments.
Yeah.
So what was the most memorable part of the Red Rising book for you? Like what part of the book do you just go back to over and over again?
I can answer while I was thinking about it a little bit, because we've answered this question over time after talking to people, but I think it might even change over time because the way we think about the book, the way we talk about it. But the one that keeps coming back to me for book one is the scene where Darrow ends up essentially whipping a character who does something really terrible. And then he gives the whip to that character, and I think eventually to Pax or to someone else, and says, whip me too. This is the type of leader I want to be. I don't want to be just the person who punishes, but I want to feel your pain too. When we feel pain, we feel it together. And that to me was like the moment that I was like, I want to read every book that Pierce writes. I want to read every book in this world, because that is, again, I don't know if that was the right decision, but it was such an interesting decision for Darrow to make, and I read a lot of books where like people are leaders, but they're leaders because the author has said that they're a leader now. But in Red Rising, I get why people follow Darrow. I get it because of the decisions he makes, and that was one of those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. You bringing that up gave me chills, because that is one of my favorite moments of the book too.
Yeah.
He whips the person, and then he like you just said, he gives the whip to someone. He's like, "You're not doing it hard enough." And so
he gives it to Pax and tells him to start over.
Even start over, which is that lead, like the servant leadership type thing, which it just is very exemplified. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I think in the first book, it is honestly, it's the moment when Darrow has a conversation with one of the, I want to call them instructors, but they're not instructors. One of the adults.
Yeah.
Proctors. There we go. And just sort of that slow realization that the game is rigged, that to win, you don't have to just win. You have to beat you have to beat the rules. You have to cheat. It's so demoralizing, but the choice to continue despite that is amazing.
Yeah. I think he does a really good job of setting up some very serious problems for Darrow, and as a reader, it's really fun when an author can set up because I think both of your examples do this, where the author can set up a problem or an obstacle, and you're like, how would I solve that? And in both cases, it's like, I don't know, like that's unwinnable. Like, what do you do?
Right.
Like one of your dudes, was gonna do this awful thing to this girl, and like now, are you gonna kill him and alienate half your people, or are you gonna, what are you gonna do? And in both of those cases, like it's fun to see Darrow kind of come to a conclusion that I just didn't think of. And then and like you said, Jamey, I think that helps solidify like that is why he is a leader. That's why it's believable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to be cognizant of our time today. So I want to ask one more question. Do we have time for one more? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
definitely.
So what about this book do you think sets it apart from other fantasy novels? So we have talked about on our podcast before that there's just something about it that, I mean, Dalton's read it, 25 times now? Probably, maybe not that time. But it's one of these that there are a lot of these books that we keep coming back to, but every single time I reread Red Rising, I'm like, I just want to read this more and more. And so what about that? Because I think both of you kind of share that we've been talking about. What about it sets it apart? What makes it so great, and why people want to keep reading it?
Honestly, I think it is it's the same thing. It's characters making tough choices that their situations are not real life. They're super realistic, but the choices that they're having to make resonate. There are people in tough decisions in places that are not black and white, and it's not a matter of just doing the right thing. It's a matter of figuring out how to continue despite the fact that every choice is bad. And that I think is something that people deal with in real life. And so stories like this give us hope. They give us they give us a sense that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, or maybe there's going to keep on being tunnels, but at least there is a way to continue forward despite everything being dark right now.
That was really well put.
I like that.
Yeah.
That would also be my number one answer. Alex said it way better than I could have, but that would be my number one answer. But one literary thing that I can mention in the book that I think is really impressive is how Pierce keeps opening up the world a little bit more in ways that I didn't expect. Like in the first book, the first 50 to maybe 100 pages are underground. And I kind of thought that was going to be the whole book. I thought the struggle of the entire first book was to get out of that underground cavern mining system. And then when we moved on past that, within the first book, I was like, oh, wow, this world is so much bigger and I get to experience it right away. And then it happens again. I don't want to spoil for future books, but the world does keep getting bigger in ways where the world both feels small, like it's not a universe, it's a solar system, but it also, he just keeps unraveling a little more about the world that makes sense, that fits with everything. And that's what keeps me reading, I think, that I want to know a little bit more, whether it's another character, another planet, another piece of the world. It seems like there's always something else to explore and discover. And Pierce does I think, a wonderful job of unraveling that.
He does a fantastic job. When I first read, kind of when Darrow goes up to the surface and kind of sees the world, I felt personally betrayed. I connected with Darrow, and like, this is it. They're doing the thing. They are making Mars habitable. They are terraforming Mars, to use a board game term, right? And all of a sudden, it's there's already life there. It's sustainable. And I was just like, oh shoot, come on. Like, you can't do that to
How dare
you can't do that to Darrow. He's awesome. So I agree. I think Pierce writes that phenomenally well. And in the later books as well. It does not go away. So
For sure.
So Dalton, do you have anything else to add? Or any other questions that you wanted to?
No, I think this has been a really great introduction to the topic for us. So I really appreciate you guys joining. And it's great to hear your perspectives, both on the game and then also on the book that we're about to spend the next hour or so talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you both for joining.
Thank you for joining. Jamey, Alex, do you want to do any promotion? Where can people find you? Kind of.
Sure. Yeah. If they want to learn more about Stonemaier games, there's a couple different resources they can check out, but everything is at stonemeiergames.com. There, if you want to go and check out the game, you can pre-order it from us or order it by the time this goes live. You can order that from our web store. You can, if you want, I write a lot about Kickstarter and crowdfunding and entrepreneurship. If you want to learn about that, that's on the website. And if you want to learn about game design or other games that might be like Red Rising, I have a YouTube channel about that too. But it's all linked there on the Stonemaier Games homepage.
And honestly, if you want to find out more about me, just go to Stonemaier Games and go to the About section and find my name. And I think my Twitter handle and everything is linked there. So that's the easiest way to follow me as well.
Thank you guys so much for having us today. This is wonderful to chat with you. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, it was a great talk. So
yeah, you too. Thank you both.
Thank you
too.
very much, and we wish you the
Cheers.
best and have a great rest of your day. Cheers. welcome back from the interview. It was great having them on. Thank you
Absolutely.
for coming on, Jamey and Alex. It was wonderful talking with you. Let's kind of hop in and start talking about the book a little bit more. So I'm really excited about the board game, and we talked about the book, but I'm excited to analyze the book.
I know.
Let's talk about it.
This is our favorite part.
Yeah, this is our favorite part. We've been saying
down.
that we wanted to do this for over a year.
Yeah.
Because I think
when we envisioned the podcast, this book was on the list of
Yes.
books we wanted to break
Yeah,
down.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Pierce Brown, who is the author of the book, just does a fantastic job, I think, of kind of bringing this world to life, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit in the upcoming. But before that,
tradition states we must do a 30-second summary. Even though we've already been talking about it in the mine section in our interview, but don't worry about that.
I left all of that part out. So
I know. There is no 30-second summary. You don't know what book we're talking about
Yeah,
yet.
exactly.
Let us tell you.
Yeah. and if you haven't read the book, then this is really all you need.
This is all you need to know. Yeah,
this is all you need
This
to
is going to
know.
be a great summary. I'm willing to go first.
Okay, let's do it.
I think you've gone first last time, maybe, if I remember
I
right.
don't know.
I don't know either, but I feel like it's probably my turn.
Let me get out this timer.
Yeah, as always, I have not rehearsed. I've just taken a couple notes, so we'll see if I run out of time or not.
Have you ever? No, yeah, you ended like really early one time.
I ended like really. I think like of the couple times, like I've been dead on like once or twice, ended super early one time and totally missed on another. Like I think
So
Mistborn.
your average is good.
Yeah, my average is good, so I'm hoping to be kind of close here. Keep the average good.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Darrow is a simple miner whose wife gets him into trouble. Ugh. She becomes a martyr and a symbol. Darrow gets mad and dies. Darrow is revived and decides to re-envision himself. He becomes a gold and enters gold school. After meeting his best friend Cassius, Darrow decides to win gold school. Several is introduced and he's scary. Cassius gets mad and stabs Darrow. Darrow basically dies, but then he gets mad again and is revived by a pretty girl. Darrow and pretty girl decide to solve the game and win it. Several joins them. Darrow starts winning a lot. Proctors cheat. Darrow is mad again. Bearman dies. Darrow gets really mad and conquers the Proctors. Everyone
Stop.
thinks, I was on the last point.
Darrow gets really mad. And I think the book can pretty much be summarized in that
And
sentence.
Darrow gets mad.
Darrow is upset. Oh, shit.
That's not bad.
That wasn't bad.
I
Yeah.
was like 4 seconds long. That's okay. I'm all right with that. I'll take it.
I did not rehearse this one as much as I normally do. I've had
Okay.
a pretty busy week. So
Okay. All right. Well, maybe
Hold on.
today's the day that you.
I went long one time.
I think I would have had it if I hadn't called Darrow Marrow at one point, because I was trying to say Darrow gets mad, and mad and Darrow got combined into Marrow.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Darrow likes to dig holes, then he gets in trouble with his wife for looking at stars. She sings the song so bad that people kill her. Hole Digger gets mad and tries to die. Task failed successfully. He gets the most epic makeover of all time and gets this badass scholarship to like the Harvard of killing people. Gets drafted in the first round. Diglett kills his new friend brother. Not really a good thing. They play the Hunger Game. Mars splits the party. Darrow finds a horse, makes enemies with a small wolf. Dugtrio makes an army of outcasts. The teachers decide to cheat. Shovel decides to take over the teacher's dorm and kisses the horse. Arrow wins the Hunger Games and sells out to the enemy.
Oh, nicely done. You were at like 28 seconds.
Okay.
Excellent.
I like it.
Man, there's some really good stuff in there too.
Actually, when I was writing it, I was like, I'm just gonna like never call Darrow again.
Yeah, just Arrow the entire time.
Arrow, Diglett, Dugtrio. He likes to dig holes. I don't
He
know.
likes to dig holes. It's a core part of his personality.
It really is. He has really strong hands, dexterous fingers.
A Dexter. I love that as a trope for his character, that he has the strongest hands.
Yes, it feels like a My Hero Academia like superpower.
It's like his weird quirk. Like he can squeeze anything to death.
Yes.
Like that's his superpower amongst anything else. That's what he's really good at.
Oh, geez, that's funny.
Yeah. Can you imagine Darrow like if he had been made instead of a gold into like an obsidian, so he got like 8 fingers on each hand, you know?
Unlimited power.
He'd just be unstoppable.
It'd be OP. It would not be a
I
fun
know.
book to read. It would just,
That's right.
It'd be like Superman. It's just, nah, it's not interesting.
He has no kryptonite. He has 8 fingers on his hands. What are you supposed to do?
Oh man. Okay, so already we're talking about obsidians, golds, reds.
Yep.
Let's just break down the structure. Let's just do it.
Okay.
Let's so this world is not like our own world.
Yeah.
I think I guess I would consider the different colors. So different people are different colors, which is basically a different caste. I would assume,
This is a huge like world building element.
yes,
in the story.
absolutely. They are like the same species.
Yeah, that is confirmed in the series. Yeah.
So they kind of came from Earth, but like it's a hierarchy. Golds are at the top, reds are at the bottom,
Yeah.
and that is very much defined right at the start of the book.
Yeah. I think it's such a cool world building element because it gives you this feeling of like oppression and hierarchy just like immediately, right? Just like by the way that it's described, you get this feeling of like, oh, Darrow is fighting a losing battle just like from the get-go, right? He's just like set out at a disadvantage.
Yes, he is. But what I think is really interesting is like when he is in the mine at the beginning of the book, when he believes that the Reds are the only people on Mars and they are trying to make it habitable for humanity.
Yeah.
He knows that he's at the bottom of the food chain, but it's more along the lines of, this is my job. This is what I'm good at. The Golds are good at ruling. It's not, it almost doesn't feel like a pyramid, where it very much is.
Yeah.
The Reds are the base, the Golds are the top. So it's just a really interesting world building and kind of like a psychological thing that the Reds kind of support society, but they are nobodies.
Yeah. It's cool how he has his whole society, like he talks about like Reds are of passion and Reds are of like love and Reds are of music and dancing. And, you know, they do have things that give them pride and give them definition. We mentioned in the interview with Jamey and Alex that it's super impressive how much definition Pierce Brown is able to achieve amongst the Reds, just even in like the opening couple of chapters, right? You get like how the Lambdas feel versus how like, you know, the Helldivers feel versus how like the women and his mother and like they all have like all of this like definition, but these common themes that run through them of hot-headedness and passion and love, and I think that is such an achievement amongst like his writing style that like, yes, there is all this definition and all these prerequisites where like characters have to have these character traits, but they still end up being like these intricate, detailed, interesting characters.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, where they are able to provide unique characteristics to all of the Reds, even though that they're defined by this one trait. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And it's also like, I don't think that I like it in principle, but I really like how Pierce Brown does it, where it's like the Golds are the bad. Right? Like it seems very like elementary almost in that sense, where it's like Gold bad, Red good, right? And we can just go with that. But like as you progress through the story, you start to see the dimensions of the Golds as well. Yeah. And I think Darrow says something even that like not all Golds are bad. Or he starts to feel that way. Like he falls in love with Mustang. He forms a bond with Severo, and he starts to understand that it's not just this one-dimensional thing that he sees all the other colors as. All the colors have multiple dimensions, which I think is just a really interesting way that Pierce Brown writes it. Yeah, for sure. They have this overarching trait, but then they have very definitive personalities in that. And so not all the Golds are necessarily villains in that sense, and not all the Reds are necessarily heroes in that sense. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It starts to like already kind of raise the question that I think Darrow has to really face like later in the series, like not so much in the book Red Rising, but raising the question of like, what's the end game here, right? Is the end game just like kill all of the Golds?
Yes.
You know, like that's yes, that's your answer. Get mad, kill all Golds. Like that's fine, but like there's Julian, right, who's introduced very early, who is kind of this like picture of innocence, R.I.P. in peace, who is like this picture of innocence, right, who Darrow has to just like brutally kill and kind of like accept that part of himself of like, is this like what I'm like willing to do to actually like, and is this the end game? Is it killing all the Golds, even the ones who haven't done anything wrong?
Yeah. We talked in our interview with Jamey and Alex about like your most memorable moment from Red Rising. And that is my answer, is when Darrow has to kill Julian. Yeah. Because he's made his friend with Cassius, and he knows what's happening, and he makes the decision because he has this internal struggle, right? He's never killed someone before. And all of a sudden he's put in this unwinnable situation where he has to kill somebody that like his only friend at that point, right? His little brother, and like that's an unwinnable decision, and he still sides with the Reds at that point, right? He sides with the mission, which like I guess the other option is death. So like yeah.
But I do think it's funny in that scene that Julian is like, come on, like, you know, if I don't win, like my family's going to like, you know, disown me, and it's like, yeah, but I would be dead. That's way worse for me.
That's very true. But I just really like that part because as people know, if you've listened to the podcast before, I really enjoy the psychological battles almost more so than kind of the physical battles and the shows of strength. And so this is definitely a choice that Darrow has to make very early on, where he kind of shows his non-hero side. Yeah. Right? Like I think Darrow is a very interesting and a fantastic leader. Yeah. I don't like, I don't know if he's a hero, like maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I just really enjoy like that dark side, because like the typical hero would have found a way out of that without killing. Maybe not.
That's a good
necessarily,
point, though. Yeah,
but he's he's willing to do what it takes.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting. So yeah, let's
is that murder like justified just because he needed to?
Yep.
You know,
I mean, it's gold, right?
Right. Yeah, it's the gold. We've been taught through the book that they're bad people. So like, are they okay to kill? But Julian isn't responsible for the oppression of the Reds.
And he's written as such a humble character. I think Julian is, and it's an innocent character, which I think is really intentional by Pierce. Right? It's almost like Darrow is killing his own innocence at that point.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Which I just think is really cool. But okay, so let's talk about Darrow and heroes.
Yeah.
Do you think
we have to at some point?
Yeah. Do you think that Darrow is a hero?
Yeah, I think overall, yes. I think that Darrow is a hero.
Okay.
I think he's a fantastic hero. I think he meets what we look for in a hero, in that his flaws and his struggles are very relatable and they're very human. Right? Yeah. So when you see first off that like his love dies in this like awful, terrible way where
that was horrible, dude.
That is shocking.
That is fucked up. Like the fact that you have to pull the legs while they're hanging to break the neck. Like the first time I read this book and I read that, I was like, okay, this is the book. Like,
that's the direction this book is going.
This
book isn't fucking around.
Floored. Yeah. Like I was just wow. Okay, sorry to cut you off. But
I love that you said it, because like we should mention also early and often, Pierce is good with repetition of words. That's a strength of his, because he says multiple times in the book, on Mars, whatever the quote is, on Mars, the gravity isn't strong enough to break the neck. So they let the loved ones, like you have to pull the leg. They let the loved ones do it, or whatever the quote is. Like, and it's said very, very early in the book, and you're like, oh wow, that's like kind of sad. And then it's said in reference to EO, and you like hits.
Oh, that's sad. That's really sad.
It like shatters you, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't expect that quote to come back.
Right.
But I think like those things make Darrow, like his struggle and his like climb and his decisions, where he's like, yes, I'm deciding to kill Julian, for instance. Yes, I'm deciding to execute or allow Cassius to execute Titus. Right?
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, those become like kind of decisions where you're like, oh, that's a moral quagmire,
Right.
And
it's not winnable.
And it's not winnable. And I think I would navigate through it, and maybe I hope to come to kind of a same conclusion. And I don't know that it's the right one, but I feel like it's the one that I would come to. And I think Darrow kind of embodies those decisions kind of throughout the story.
Yeah, I think the choices that Darrow makes make him a fantastic leader. And like, I realized that I would not be able to lead an army just as effectively as Darrow could.
Yeah.
Just because of some of the
of genetically modified superhumans.
Yeah. I may be better at that.
Could you tell your army to sew themselves into dead horses?
I don't know if they would do it. I could probably say it. But yeah, I think that Darrow's a very interesting hero in my eyes. I think that he is a hero.
Yeah.
He's definitely the protagonist.
Right?
Yeah,
he's definitely the protagonist.
We'll get that out of the way.
It's first person. He's the only perspective we get in the story.
It's pretty easy to determine who the protagonist is in a first person present book.
Yes, absolutely.
But he's not a hero that is all altruistic.
That's a good word for it. Yeah.
I think that kind of describes him in that sense. But I do
EO
think
is.
EO.
She's the ultimate goodness.
She's the ultimate goodness. She's kind of the goal.
Yeah.
And I think that throughout the book, Darrow keeps remembering EO, his wife, right? Yeah. Keeps remembering and what EO's sacrifice and her love and devotion to get the Reds out of the oppression. And that's kind of what keeps him on his straight and narrow path.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of interesting that I think the further you get in the book, the further he strays from that path.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Just I guess as we started to kind of talk about other heroes in the story, like EO is obviously a very obvious hero.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Mustang can kind of be considered another one, right? And I think you're right that Darrow is constantly looking back at EO and that she is a martyr, that she is optimist is maybe not the right word, right? But she's naive.
She's naive and
she's unrealistic, maybe, right? Like early on in the story, Darrow says, I live for you, and she says you need to live for more.
Yeah.
And so she has this very naive but like almost pure and just like uninfluenced kind of view on the world that they're in. And Mustang has kind of the realistic one, right? Like Mustang has this view of like, here's what leadership could look like in our society. And it's not like this perfect world like what EO had envisioned, but it is like achievable and it's realistic. And so Darrow, I think, kind of like is warring between like these two. And I think that's why they're both kind of written as love interests also, because it like muddies like the choice for him. But he's on that spectrum and he's trying to figure out what is the end game going to look like here.
And I love that rant from like EO being like the idealistic, this is what it needs to be, this is perfection, and kind of like Darrow going into his transformation and entering the Gold School, the Academy,
the
right?
Academy,
the Academy, yeah, words. With that kind of mindset, and as he kind of understands and grows more accustomed with the golds, he grows closer to Mustang, which is the realistic and understanding and the more pragmatic of the two love interests. So I think that like, oh man, Pierce Brown just does a fantastic job of like writing in the way that Darrow is feeling and understanding the world, along with the characters and the personalities that are around him at the time.
For sure.
So
for sure. I love, we've been talking a lot about EO. I love EO as a character. I think when you, on the reread, you realize that it feels like every word that EO says is like chosen. And it doesn't make sense at the time. Like when you're looking through, you're like, oh, she's like this really sweet. But like when you read it back, specifically after reading the trilogy, like you realize like, very early on, she uses the term "break the chains" for the first time.
yes,
And that becomes kind of like it's not really discussed too much in Red Rising. It's not really a spoiler, but like in the series, that becomes almost like a
catchphrase.
A catchphrase is maybe a disrespectful thing to call it.
Yeah,
a battle cry, or it's like the term of the rebellion is "break the chains." And
yes.
It's because of that kind of video that where she says that, but she says it first to Darrow in the garden. And again, it's that concept of kind of repetition of words that Pierce is really good with.
No, I agree. We've talked about. I just want to put this in because it's one of my favorite quotes from any book of all time.
Okay.
And we've been talking about leadership and how Darrow's a fantastic leader, and we see a lot of different leaders in this book, right? We see the Jackal who leads through fear.
Yeah.
We see Darrow who leads through
initially through fear also.
We see Mustang who leads through cunning. We see Severo who leads through just like sheer like insanity.
Severo's a cult.
Yeah.
That is not an understatement. Like Severo's leading a cult.
That's very fair. But I love the quote. Do you want to quote it?
Are you talking about my favorite quote from the book?
Yes, I am, because it's also mine.
Yeah, this was also when we asked this question to Jamey about what's like kind of your most memorable or your favorite moment from the book or whatever. It's mine as well. We shared the time where Darrow allows Pax to whip him, right? Sort of like the whipping of Cactus, and then he allows Pax to whip him.
Great scene,
right? Great scene. And then he stands up and he says something along the lines of like, you don't follow me because I'm the strongest, Pax is. You don't follow me because I'm the brightest or the smartest, Mustang is. You follow me because you don't know where you're going, and I do.
Chills, literal chills. Yeah, and then Mustang kind of calls him on his bullshit, but
yeah, right.
But I think that's just like an incredible sense of emotional awareness at that point, right? Because he knows that he's not the strongest, he's not the brightest, but he knows how to pull on people's strengths and how to utilize them. And I think that's what really makes a great leader.
Yeah.
Whereas Darrow is a hero. He's not, I don't think, the best hero. I think he's one of the best leaders we have seen in fiction.
Yeah.
He's no, what's the other call out? He's no, he's no Genghis. He's no, Caesar. He's no Wigan. Or
yeah.
That'd be the other leader, I guess.
Yeah.
The Easter eggs in this book are
the Easter eggs
point.
are fun. Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to talk about this book outside of Darrow, right? Because it's written from his perspective.
Yeah, we have so much of his perspective. Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about his story a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe like how the story progresses and how he changes throughout the story. We've alluded to it a little bit, but let's do that. Where is Darrow at the start of the story? Like what is his mindset and how does that transform as he, his wife is killed,
right,
etc.
Right. Yeah, I think this book has an excellent exposition. I think it's really, really good.
It really is.
Like it starts with like a prologue that kind of gives you this like glimpse into what is coming, where you get a feeling that he's an intruder. You get a feeling that he has kind of successfully infiltrated, and he's talking about what everybody else is seeing and what he's thinking, and you get a feeling for his anger, right? It's like right there in the prologue.
Yep.
It's in the first couple like paragraphs of the book. And then you like transition and you get this like Jamey talked about kind of like the growing perspective throughout the book, right? Where you start in just like the mind, and your entire vision of the book is narrowed to like even just a single tunnel, right? The first scene that you have with Darrow, he's digging, like he's in a machine digging, and like that is your perspective on the world, and it really kind of fixates you to like, okay, this is, again, it's assisted by the narrative style of like this first person present tense, where like you feel like you're also in the miner, right? You're also in the tunnels, and like that's all you're kind of like focused on. And he runs into a problem, and like your mind immediately goes to like fixing like that problem, and you see some of his cunning immediately, right? You see some of his like problem solving skills and everything.
His risk taking.
That's a good point. Yeah, you kind of like get that he's a fighter, right? You get that he's a risk taker, and it's all packed into just like honestly a couple of short pages, right?
Looking back on it before the reread, so this is my second time reading through it. I know you've read it
I think this is 3 or 4, probably 4.
Yeah. Rereading it, I did not realize how short that time is before you realize that Mars is actually already habited.
Yeah.
It was just kind of interesting looking back on it, because it felt like such a much longer part of the book. Mm-hmm. And then you realize that, it's really not. But
it's really not, yeah.
It's kind of it's interesting because you are seeing the world through Darrow's eyes.
Yeah.
You kind of are able to put yourself in his shoes and get that sense.
Yeah. I wonder if it's because like the book is constantly looking back on that time of his life, right? So it becomes really almost solidified, like you're constantly reviewing it, and so it's like always on your mind, And he references back to like the laurels, like the laurel ceremony, which happens like really early in the book.
Anywhere from like 5 to 300 pages. I don't actually know.
It's like within the first hour in our terms. And it's this immediate like kind of solidification of the themes of like oppression, like of injustice, right?
Unfairness.
It's
right? just propagated throughout the book.
Yeah.
So where do you think that the exposition ends?
With Eo's death.
With Eo's death? Okay.
Yeah. I think that's like, because that's kind of the call to action. That's like, I mean, I guess technically it would be with when Darrow is like Lazarus.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's like Eo dies and Darrow, then there's kind of like a filler scene where like Darrow like does this heroic thing of like burying her, and then he gets hanged too. But that like it feels like kind of still maybe part of the call to action end of exposition to me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. And so when we were moving into that rising action, right? So Darrow, his whole life, his whole motivation is Eo.
Yeah.
Right. Until he gets brought up to the surface and meets Mickey. And I think exactly. We had the same like kind
the first
of
and only
point.
Violet, I think, in the Red Rising book.
Oh yeah,
the first book. Yeah.
So real quick, we'll side break. How many colors are there? Do you know?
14.
Oh fuck.
Do you not think?
Yeah,
I like it's one of those things that like I don't know, like I probably don't have a right to know that, but I do just know that there are 14.
I was just like there are a lot more than I thought.
Yeah,
right?
there are a lot more than you think. Yeah,
but
and there are way more than are described in the first book. They are explored more in the rest of the trilogy.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. So, fine.
I don't think I could name them, but.
But yeah, so the rising action starts when he's brought up to the surface, right?
Yeah,
and
I would agree.
we discussed it with Alex and Jamey, where like because it's that first person present tense, you feel betrayed yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, oh my goodness, they're doing this. They think that they're doing this for the rest of humanity when really they're not. Right. They're doing it to support the goals. So he goes in, he meets Mickey, and that kind of starts his transformation, both physically and I think mentally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mickey's the Violet who cuts him up and does all this stuff. And so how do you think that, like, obviously this changes him physically. How do you think that, like, his mental state, how do you think that changes through, like, Eo's death into becoming a gold?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think at Eo's death, he is suicidal, right? We know that.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of did.
He essentially commits, and he even talks about, like, when he's being hanged, like, the moment of regret that suicidal people like experience, right? And so he absolutely is. He gets kind of this mission, right? He gets, again, kind of the call to action. He gets this exposure to like what he could do. But I think his vision still, even early in his carving, is very narrow, right? He talks about in like the drafting, like if I just had a bomb on me right now, I could blow all these golds up.
Yeah.
Right. It's obvious at that point that he's still just thinking about killing golds. Like he's thinking about just being this this tool of the Sons of Ares, this like almost just a terrorist weapon is kind of what he envisions himself as. I think coming out, so it goes from like suicidal maniac to like terrorist weapon, and over the course of the book, he kind of grows out of that.
Yeah, as his physical capabilities start to expand and enhance, I think his mental capabilities do so as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So he starts to understand that, oh, just me taking out 60 golds with a bomb is actually not the most effective way to bring down the society.
Yeah.
Which I just thought was kind of interesting. And also, do you feel like that thought was propagated through his transformation, or was that thought kind of always with him?
Which thought?
Like the fact that he grows from understanding that the better way to take down the society or to infiltrate the society is going through this long process rather than just like the immediate win with like a suicide bomb.
Okay. Yeah. I think that first off, I think he has like a misconception of what the Sons of Ares are, right? Because he's kind of saturated in that propaganda that the golds are putting in front of the reds of like the Sons of Ares are blowing up all these children and everything. And we don't really learn in Red Rising so much. I think there's a lot of open questions at the end of the first book. I think
sets it up nicely for a sequel.
It does.
Which good news, guys.
Yeah, good news. There are several more books. But I think it's an open question. Like, what are the motivations of the Sons of Ares? Like, what is their end game? What are they trying to do? And I think that Darrow, even through his transformation, doesn't really understand that. You know, I think it's really only when he gets to the point of being recuperated and healed by Mustang and kind of hearing her vision of leadership, and they kind of like come to this conclusion together of like what leadership in the Institute could look like to them, that he starts to think outside of. I think at that point is when he starts to change from I'm just going to be like some cleverly placed suicide bomb into
right.
Like maybe Eo's dream can be more than that, right? Maybe it can be maybe he can affect real change.
Right. Yeah. He's the knife rather than the hammer.
Yeah.
Yep. So he recuperates. He becomes this fantastic gold with these amazingly strong hands.
Yep. Such good hands.
So
he learns to ride a horse, kind of.
Yeah. Kind of. Yeah. Wait, the horse or Mustang? Hey-o! Oh.
Good. You're making the same type of jokes that Cactus makes.
Woo!
Good job.
Wait, what part of the book are we in? Sorry.
We are in, I don't know, entering the Institute. I think like we're in Rising Action, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you did this. I tried to make a list of like tension points in Rising Action.
No, I didn't, but I'm excited to hear them.
There are a lot.
Yeah.
It's a stressful book to read.
There's more tension points than there are colors, which there are 14 of.
Which there are 14 of. In case you didn't know. I think the natural kind of next tension point, we've already talked a lot about Julian's death, the passage, basically. I think that's kind of like the immediate next tension point. I think the next tension point is Titus. Like, he sort of introduces this bad guy almost immediately into House Mars. And you get this feeling of like, okay, like I've expanded from the mines to the surface. I've expanded from the surface to a gold, from the gold to the Institute. Now I'm in the Institute. I'm in House Mars. Like, what does Darrow have to do? He has to kind of unite House Mars. And Titus is the opposition to that, right? And you find out later that he's a red, which is like a really cool, unexpected twist. Like, I love that.
That was so cool.
It was such a cool twist. But it's the first time that Darrow, or it's not the first time but it's kind of the next time when Darrow is faced with an impossible situation. You mentioned that like Julian kind of feels like his first. You might say that like the death of Eo and like his decisions around getting whipped, maybe that's his first impossible situation. But the next one that he's facing is like, what does he do about Titus?
Yeah, I think Titus Prose is an interesting threat, especially from like the eyes of Darrow, right? Because you know, he's overcome all of these crazy things, his wife dying, becoming a gold, and then all of a sudden like Titus seems so trivial when you put it in that perspective, but at the moment it's the biggest thing in the world, right? He has to unite House Mars, and Titus is preventing him from doing that. Yeah.
And I think there's also this like very natural like, oh, he's like raping people, like, yeah, kill him,
yeah,
like
that's
execute, that's awful, you know, like, and then all of a sudden it's like it reveals that he's a red. And all of a sudden the decision becomes complicated, right?
Right.
Because you're facing with this like golds are bad, reds are good mentality has been turned on its head. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, am I okay with reds raping golds? Like is that acceptable? Like, no, of course not. Right? But like I think your gut immediate reaction is like, oh yeah, execute him. Oh, but he's a red, maybe you shouldn't. And then you have to like kind of as a reader, you have to like, you're almost like immediately just slapped in the face with that of like, why am I questioning that? Why does it make a difference what color he is, right?
Yeah. And I think this is another fantastic example from Pierce where it kind of shows what, like if Darrow never evolved mentally, right? He just evolved physically. I feel like Darrow is Titus if he doesn't start to understand the big picture, right? That's Titus. Titus is like, let's just cause destruction, which is what Darrow was right at the beginning of his carving.
Yeah, unbridled rage.
Yeah, so it's just another example of Pierce using other characters to kind of show different paths that Darrow could have taken.
Do you think he made the right decision? And
Titus,
I mean
no.
specific. What's that?
Titus, no.
No. Yeah. I mean specifically like Darrow's decision, his handling of the situation with Titus and of letting Cassius not just execute, but like brutalize him.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that
I think it's okay to not know.
yeah, I'm gonna say I don't know, and then I'm gonna ramble for a little bit.
Yeah,
we'll
do
see where it goes. I think that it's a very interesting decision, and it kind of solidifies Cassius as the leader, which kind of comes back and bites Darrow in the butt later, right? I think that it's a very interesting choice, and I think that it was a very hard choice for Darrow because he kind of relates to Titus as like this red brother,
right?
And so I don't. It's
an interesting question.
It's a very interesting. Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I think it's a very interesting kind of morality point in the sense of like, okay, was it better to just kill Titus when he was alone in the woods with him when he realizes that he's a red? Right? Is that the better move? Is that the more humane move? Or like bringing him back, letting Cassius do what he did to Titus, and kind of solidify that that leadership and leading through terror,
right?
But as a good guy-ish at the time, I don't know.
Yeah, I think like in my opinion, strategically, it was in terms of playing the game. Strategically, it was the right move. It solidified his alliance with Cassius, right? Cassius felt like he was owed, and he kind of gave that to him. It also took the target off of his back a little bit because he kind of places the death of Julian on indirectly. He even, before that, he kind of set it up, right? He kind of implied that maybe it was the death of Julian was Titus's fault. In terms of him as a hero, it was not the right moral choice.
Yeah, I think tactically. Exactly what I was about to summarize it like that. Yeah, tactically it was the right decision. Morality, maybe not.
Yeah, iffy.
Iffy. I'm really glad that he didn't like oust himself and say bloody damn right back at Titus.
Right. Right.
So, but I think that was also kind of a moment of realization later when you realize that they're always being watched. And do you think that the Golds actually knew that Titus was a red after that moment in the woods?
I mean, I don't think so. Like, I think.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Because Darrow slips up and swears in the red language with bloody damn at one point. And
it's in his fight with Apollo.
It's in his fight with Apollo. Severo picks it up.
Which is confusing, by the way, because Apollo is the name of my cat.
Which, like, your cat would have won that fight. Like, he's scary. Severo picks it up, but I don't think any of the Proctors really do.
Yeah. Actually, we know that they don't because Severo, the reason he picks it up is because he's editing the footage, right? It's right at the end of the book, like he's editing it out. Yeah. And so he kind of makes this implication of like, hey, I cut out that thing that you said, and Darrow's like, I don't know what that meant, or he's like, he knows what it meant, but he's like, is he talking about what I think he's talking about?
Right.
So next tension point briefly, I don't think there's a lot to say about it, but probably in my mind would be the fallout with Cassius. Like it feels like Darrow kind of has a couple of victories and all of a sudden the book like takes a turn, right?
Yeah.
Where he has this like fall from grace, right? Where he has kind of ruled under fear and under terror and all of a sudden he feels like he is the hunted, right? Where like Antonia and her gang like kind of betray him, right? And it becomes apparent like he was only powerful because he was feared and Cassius is more powerful than him, right? In a one-on-one fight.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a good tension point. What else do you got? What are some of your other tension points?
Yeah, after that, the whipping of Cactus I think is a really important tension point. We've talked a lot about that already.
Yeah.
But it's the moment where you go, oh, like this is what they're doing is different. And it's that next time that Darrow is faced with an impossible situation, but it's the first time that he's faced with an impossible situation, and he comes up with a solution to it that works.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. I think that that's the first time where you are just like, yes, like that is exactly how I would have handled it because I'm awesome. No, but like it does feel like that was the right choice. Whereas before,
absolutely.
it doesn't feel like Darrow has made many right choices.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, shit. Yep. He did it. Yep.
He did it. That was the
Like
correct choice.
That's a way to earn undying loyalty right there.
Yeah.
Or I guess dying loyalty. Oops.
I had in my well, I'll talk about that. So the next tension point is, in my mind, Pax's death.
Okay.
Right. I think that after the whipping of Cactus, Darrow has a series of successes, and there are some, like, House Apollo's like some oppression to him. Everybody throws their spears at, like, there's like the tricking of the proctors where they're all like sitting around the campfire, and they have their sound barrier, whatever it's called, up.
Oh, I love that part.
Yeah, and Severo has to go piss. You know?
How long does it take to run to?
Yeah, exactly. How fast can Severo run?
Yeah.
And so then they take down the barrier, and they just hear howling.
Yeah.
It's like Severo and the Howlers are enough to like take down an entire house,
Yes.
like castle, by themselves because they're that fucking nuts.
Yeah.
But like all that to say, then the next like kind of tension point is with the Jackal, who we haven't talked about yet. I think that's a great next place to go.
Yeah,
that kind of culminates in Pax's death. It's a real failure of Darrow's.
Yes. Yeah. And I think Jackal probably is one of the better heroes in the story.
I want to be like the Jackal.
Yes. No. But okay. All joking aside, I think the Jackal is a really interesting villain.
Yeah.
In the sense that we don't get a lot of screen time with the Jackal.
Yeah.
But we fear the Jackal.
Right.
Right. It's almost like Vader in A New Hope, where he's like this ultimate feared person, but you don't get a lot of him.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the Jackal, where the fear that you see from the Jackal is more in the unknown and like the lore that people bring to Darrow. So tell us a little bit more about the Jackal.
No, man, I get excited about the Jackal. The Jackal is a fantastic villain in my mind. I love that in his introduction, first of all, Darrow kind of like realizes that who the Jackal is. Like that's a really, like, he called that. That's awesome.
Yep.
That's really cool to see. And it's one of those times where Pierce does a good job of, even though we are only hearing the story from Darrow's internal monologue, he's hiding the truth from the reader. And that's a really delicate line to walk, right? So that
is an impressive and delicate line
absolutely.
to walk.
Because we don't know that the wine is not real wine,
Yep.
right? And everybody, he tells all his soldiers to get drunk, and they're all like, what are you talking about? And the audience are like, this is a weird scene. Like, I don't understand what's going on
What is happening? This is way out of character.
Yeah, exactly. And then you kind of like look back on it once you realize what has happened, and you're like, oh, that all makes sense. But like you're not hearing that part of Darrow's kind of thought process of what's going on. I think that the fact that the Jackal is made to be weak and small was a very smart choice.
I agree.
Because like Titus was not that. Titus was like big and strong and scary, right? Cassius is like not necessarily big and strong and scary, but he's skillful and he's dangerous, right? And the Jackal's not. Like you get the impression very early on, like in a one-on-one fight, like Darrow could just take him.
Yeah, he could just straight up kill him.
Yeah. And that's not what makes him scary, you know?
Yeah.
What makes him scary is the fact that he's willing to chop his own hand off to get out of a bad situation.
Yeah.
And like that scene hits you and you're like, this, I think Darrow even says like, this dude is another beast. Like he is another animal. I am not prepared to handle the lengths that this guy is willing to go to. And the Jackal's alive and well at the end of the series, right? And so you can assume, and you would be correct, going forward into the series, he is maintained as a villain, and I think his kind of like growth and change as a villain is really well handled and executed.
And just to kind of tie back into our story / character arc discussion, is that we're talking about villains right now, right? Which is the Jackal.
Yeah.
But if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, Darrow is surrounded by villains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So the Golds are the villains, right? In his sense. But at that moment, it's the Jackal and his house and everyone that's allied with him.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to take that step back because one of our most recent kind of not book breakdowns, but our most recent like book episodes was talking about like story or character arc and how that changes like how the decisions change throughout a character's
Yeah.
story. And I just think that that's a really interesting tie-in, because at that point, you as the reader has also grown with Darrow. It's like, hey, these golds are my friends, but at the beginning of the book, they're my arch enemies.
Yeah.
And it's just it's kind of an interesting way to turn it on its head. It's like, hey, the jackal is the enemy, where it's, yes, he is,
Yeah.
but he's the bigger enemy of all your enemies.
Yeah.
And we've talked about quotes. I think that this book has some of the more quotable lines in it.
Yeah.
And so
It could be very like pithy at times almost. You know?
Yeah. My favorite quote is the one that you quoted already.
Yeah.
By far. The second one that I really enjoy, it's said by Darrow, and he says, "I'm a sheep wearing wolf's clothing in a pack of wolves."
Yeah.
Which is kind of like turning that on its head, and it kind of reminds you where Darrow came from and what his overarching goal is. Because in the game, it's very straightforward. This is my goal. But when you take a step back, it's actually, this is the big picture. And so I just wanted to
I'm
bring
so
that
glad
up.
that you brought us here in the analysis. I think this is really cool to talk about. So a couple of things on this. So first, the narrative style really plays into the point that you're making here, right? The narrative style makes you, the reader, really experience the loneliness that Darrow is experiencing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because you are only hearing the story from his perspective, and you find yourself, I think, really wanting to know, like, well, what is Mustang thinking? You know, what is Severo thinking?
Yeah.
Like, what is Cassius, the Jackal? What is Ares thinking, right? Like, whoever that is. I don't even know who Ares is, you know?
Darrow thinks he does.
Darrow thinks he does, right? And he may or may not be correct. Like, that's another one that's, like, still an open, like, but he thinks it's Dancer, right? And, like, what is Dancer thinking? What are his motives? What is Fitchner thinking? And, like, what are his, you know, like, there's all these things that you're like, if I could just step, like, why isn't this book telling me what they're thinking? Like, you know, and it isolates you.
Yeah, it
as
really
the
does.
reader, you're totally isolated to only Darrow's perspective, and that, like you said, that sheep in wolf's clothing, I think, really sinks in because of that.
You're isolated just as Darrow is isolated.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The second thing is that you're totally right. When you take a step back, all of the bad guys in the book are golds, with the exception of Titus, I think. Because Titus is a red who's been
Half
turned into
gold.
he's half gold.
He's a
right?
rust.
He's a exactly. He's a rolled, and everybody else is kind of embodying a trait of gold that makes Gold the bad guy, right? But even like you mentioned before, is Gold the bad guy? Really, like the society is the ultimate bad guy, right? Darrow is ultimately fighting a fight against like the system, you know, and he's not fighting a fight against like the Jackal. Although immediately it looks like he's fighting a fight against the Jackal. But the Jackal is a product of the system, right? And he's embodying he's embodying ruthlessness or something like that. Like some very specific trait of the system. Cassius is the same way, right? Cassius is embodying like pride, like ultimate pride and like looking down on everybody else. The Governor Augustus, right, is another one who is like, he can be seen as the bad guy. He's the guy that kills Io, essentially. He at least kind of orders it and facilitates it, but he's only a part of the problem. And so I think you're exactly right to take that perspective of like, let's step back and recognize like, yes, there are bad guys, but why are they bad guys, and what is kind of the bigger picture that they're trying to describe?
And just like you said, like each kind of student / leader of the different houses embodies a trait of the gold culture, which I think probably leads us to our next tension / climax point, which is the attack of Mount Olympus, which is kind of both symbolically and physically the taking on of the society. Yeah. And where Darrow storms the gods, right, of the game, right? Oh my gosh. Which is just a fantastic scene when you realize that not only is he like breaking the rules of the game and like kind of taking on how it's moderated and all of this, and just how that like embodies his overarching goal of taking on the gold society, right? He storms Mount Olympus. He gets his fellow golds to storm Mount Olympus with him, right? So it that to me is the climax of the book.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's debatable.
It's amazing.
Yes.
Like,
no one's ever done it before.
No one's ever done it before. You don't even know what the climax is going to be until it's happening, right?
And it happens quick.
It happens fast. And you're like, holy shit! Like he's gonna take Olympus. He's just gonna, like, that's the fight he's gonna fight. He's gonna fight the fucking proctors.
Yeah.
And I would love to just be like, just like a bug on the wall when like, so he takes like kind of the core group, like Severo and the Howlers and everyone that's with him. And if you remember, he gets to Olympus and he like just starts going in.
Yeah.
And then he sends like Pebble and like a couple other people back, somebody, I forget who, he sends them back and he says, go get the army. Right.
Yeah.
And I would love to just be like a fly on the wall when like Pebble comes back and she's like, Reaper's taking Olympus, and they're all like, what the fuck? Let's go. Like they're partying right at the time. Like they're drinking, and they're drinking and they just had this big victory and they're just like, fucking Reaper, man. This dude is legit. Like this dude is insane. He wants to take Olympus. Let's do it. And they just hop on and like his whole army, like, I don't know. That scene is, I think it's so incredible how, like you said, it totally embodies his whole struggle. But I think you just expected that he was going to take down the Jackal.
Yes. Yeah. I was about to bring that up where like the entire like scene in the academy is that the climax is going to be his fight with the Jackal. Mm-hmm. And it's not.
It's not.
It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
Both physically and metaphorically, right? Because he kind of like reverts back to realizing that his overarching game, quote, game, is not to win the Academy's game, is to take down the society. And that's him starting to do that.
Yeah.
So I
love like the slight pettiness too of Darrow where he, those moments where he's like when he has his Howlers buried in horses' guts and he's trying to take House Minerva and he's fighting Pax and he's like, I don't have to fight him at this point. I've already won, but like I want to beat him.
Yep.
And I think he's a little bit that way with like his fight with Apollo.
Yep.
And his fights with Jupiter where he's like he doesn't need to take Olympus. Like he has done well enough to achieve the goal that like the Sons of Ares need him. He's gonna be a praetor or something,
right?
Like something important, a legate, something. And he's like, no, fuck it. Like I'm
I'm going for it.
I'm going for it. I'm gonna take everybody down.
So we've talked about the climax of the book, which is an awesome climax.
Yeah.
Let's briefly like touch on like we've hit the top of the pyramid. Let's come back down the falling action and the resolution of the book. What do we see in the resolution of the book?
Yeah, I think like once you kind of realize where the book is going in the climax, the falling action is maybe understandable or even predictable. You realize like, okay, Darrow's essentially won the game. He's going to get some sort of like awesome assignment coming out of this. It ends up being the governor, and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like,
that's
he's
a fun interpersonal conflict,
right? He's the dude he hates most in the world because he killed his wife. So
that's tough. But at least he has a new girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. He has a new girlfriend. I think what's maybe more interesting is like what is not resolved. Right? Mm-hmm. What is not resolved in the book. There are a lot of open questions at the end of the book. We've already talked about like, where the hell are the Sons of Ares? Like, they seemed so important, right? And then they just go away.
You kind of forget about them.
Yeah, you kind of do. It contributes to that isolation, I think, that Darrow is kind of feeling.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's like an open question. Like, where are the Sons of Ares? Like, what are they doing? What are the goals and motivations of like some of these goals that he's met along the way? Like Severo makes again that kind of like implication of like he knows that he said bloody damn. Like, does he understand what that means? Like the implications of that. Like, what is he going to do with that information? Like going forward, and like what does Severo even really want? Like, he's a weird gold.
Like, he is a weird gold. I think kind of like that can be expanded to any of the golds because you kind of understand the motivation and the wants and the needs of the golds inside the game.
Yeah,
but it's a game.
Yeah.
Right. So when you take a step back after you've graduated from that, where's everybody gonna go?
For sure.
Like what
Mustang, Cassius.
What are they gonna do? Right. Yeah. Like Darrow's made friends and enemies in this game, and how is that gonna affect real life?
Yeah. Yeah. I think another one that isn't resolved is Io mentions that she has 2 gifts for Darrow in the garden, and she gives him one of them, and she kind of withholds the other one. She said she'll give it to him at a later date, and then she's executed. And he mentions like later in the book, like 2/3 of the way through the book or something like that, he kind of like remembers that. Like, I wonder what Io's other gift is, right? And that's something that's, I think, Io is such an like you said, she's the ideal. She's the like kind of the beacon that is like what Darrow is kind of like. She's like his waystone or something, right? Like what he's like measuring himself. So the fact that there's this kind of like unresolved question around Io is, I think, really confusing at the end of the book because she seems so like certain and definite, and so the fact that there's this like, what is that other gift, I think is just kind of like a lingering question that kind of carries into the rest of the series.
Also, what did she tell her sister?
Yeah, what did she tell her sister?
That's interesting.
Yeah, why did she pick her sister over Darrow?
Right. Yeah.
You know? Lastly, I think we have mentioned a little bit. I don't know if you know. Do you know how many colors there are in the book?
It's at least 6.
It's at least 6.
Yeah.
I think somewhere around 14.
I would say 14 plus or minus 0.
Right? And so we've met reds. We've very briefly met obsidians because they like captured Darrow at that one, but we really don't know that much about obsidian. We met a ton of golds. We've met a violet. We have met a copper.
Pinks.
We've met pinks. But like, there's a lot of there's blues, greens, oranges still to cover. Browns we've met like seen in the background a little bit, but we really don't understand their role. Silvers we know exist but don't understand. Like there's a lot of colors. We've heard mention of whites, but don't know a lot about them yet.
Grays.
Grays. Yeah, we've met grays. Yeah, absolutely.
Lame.
They're just like reds, but they have guns. I don't know. But the point is that there's a lot still of like in this world building of this color hierarchy, there's a lot still to kind of explore, right? I think that the later books do a good job of starting to like build into that. That's kind of that expansion of like, okay, Darrow has gone from the mines to the surface to the gold society. We're starting in the later books to get outside of just Mars and outside of just kind of like these handful of colors that we've already met.
Yeah, and I think one of the other the other points to that is that not all reds are miners. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what
there
else?
are high reds.
there are high res. There are different types of pinks. There are different types of obsidians.
Yeah.
And how does that play into and how does that affect like social status inside of a right? They're still on the same level, but how does that affect social status inside of the color itself?
Yeah.
And I think that is very much expanded on and very interesting in the later books.
Yeah, I think we would both recommend them, right? They're absolutely worth reading. They're interesting. They will feel different because it's not an institute type of book anymore. It doesn't feel like just Hunger Games anymore. But I think the integrity of Darrow and of the like supporting cast of characters is maintained, and he's still a very interesting hero who's developing over the course of the series. So it's definitely worth reading. It will feel slightly different, but still a series that's like absolutely worth your time.
Yeah, I think that I would have the same recommendation that I did with Mistborn, where the first 3 books, the original trilogy, the OG trilogy, is really, really good, and I highly recommend it. And if you really like it, go ahead and read the second one.
Yeah. Right now, two of the books in the follow-up trilogy are released, and like I have enjoyed them, but I've enjoyed them because I really like Red Rising.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have talked about our favorite character, right?
Yeah.
Like we've talked about that in other episodes outside of this one, which is Severo.
Yeah. He's my most common answer to icebreaker questions.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Severo.
If you could give a Monopoly piece
asymmetrical
player power, what would it be? Severo.
Count it.
But yeah, so what about some other characters? What's your second favorite character in the book and
My
why?
second favorite character. I really like Cactus. I think I called him Cactus earlier in the episode.
He is Cactus from here on out.
He's always going to be Cactus. Yeah, Tactus. I really like Tactus. I think he is like, why do I like Tactus? I like Tactus because he's this character that is like he falls into the category of evil golds. I think that like Pierce almost makes a natural distribution between like, okay, yes, golds are bad, reds are good, but also there's like good golds and bad golds, right? and that like feels very like a very easy split to make, and Tactus starts to like blur that line a little bit. It becomes obvious, like, first of all, he's the reason that the whipping happens, right? So he is actually the reason that Darrow's army is like unified, right? It's for an awful reason. Like, it's not like he meant to. He was like pushing the boundaries and everything. But there's a real change in his like character arc from that point forward, right? Where he is still incredibly intelligent and vicious and this amazing fighter, and he's one of the strongest people in Darrow's army. But now he has like respect and he has like loyalty, almost like a younger brother, right? Where he feels like Darrow has done this thing for him that no one has ever done, and it forces a change in him. So like when he questions Darrow on things later, he is like questioning, and Darrow even recognizes that he is questioning, but out of respect. It's like he wants to know, but he's not going to like force the issue like he would have previously, right? We're seeing some change in Tactus.
Yeah, and I think that also goes back to kind of the effectiveness of Darrow's leadership style, where it's walking this fine line of allowing Tactus to question him and yet have certain obedience no matter what his decision is.
Yeah.
which is a really it's a thin line, right?
Really,
to have people able to question your decisions, but when you say your decision, that's the decision.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think that Cactus is awesome.
He's always going to be Cactus. And just to like plug the follow-up books, I think that he has a really great arc through the kind of the follow-up. He's a character that recurs, and his kind of like change, both negative and positive, in morality and in power, and like all the things that we talked about in the character arc story, makes him a really interesting and great character. So,
nice. Cool.
Yeah. What about you?
Severo
again.
He takes my second spot. No, I really like how the Jackal is written. I like he's not my like favorite character because like I idealize the Jackal, right? Like that'd be kind of weird. But I do think that he's
concerned.
We should talk.
Yeah.
But I do think that he's written very well. He's a great villain, especially because of kind of like all the reasons that we've talked about before, right? He's unassuming. He's small. He's vicious.
Yeah.
He's not strong because he's physically strong.
Yeah.
Type stuff. And those are the type of villains that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
That kind of cunning and cruel.
Right.
And like if you're one-on-one with him in a room, you are going to beat his ass, right? Like and that's not why people follow him.
Well, he got through the passing, but
okay, that's fair. Right?
Yeah. But it's probably rigged. Everything else in his life was rigged.
Yeah,
so.
right. He fought a pink.
He fought a pink, yeah.
But I really enjoy the way that the Jackal is written, especially in this book and also throughout the other books. So he's probably my second favorite character in the sense of the way he's written, not like because I like him as a character.
Yeah, but you do have a bit of soft spots for the villains.
I do. I like villains.
Who's your favorite character of all time?
A wonderful hero that brought balance to the Force, Anakin Skywalker.
I know.
Okay. So let's wrap this up with an interesting topic or a question that we kind of both came up with, and I think it's something that it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, I think we've kind of danced around this episode.
We kind of danced around it. Let's just talk about it. Do you think that this book seems like a realistic setting?
I'm so excited for this question.
Okay, let's go.
Yes, I do.
I need some more of this.
Pour the whiskey. Yes, inherently, yes, I do. I think, and I think just inherent with this question, we're going to get a little bit into like social commentary, right?
Yeah.
But like, does our society have goals already?
Yeah.
Like in some sense, yeah, right? Like you have to be a millionaire. You have to be born into $1 million. Like, like you have to be born into wealth a lot of times you can see that in politicians, you can see that in tech giants, you can see, like there's kind of this structure for whatever reason where, I would say like you and I, we're the mid colors, right? We're the oranges and the greens, the engineers.
We are very fortunate.
Yeah, we're very fortunate where we can have kind of a life that is acceptable, a life that is comfortable.
And honestly, really good.
Yeah,
right?
And honestly good. Like, but there are, there are reds in our society. There are low reds in our like society.
Sadly, yes.
And they're not called that, right? And they don't. And I think the like safety net that we like as a society have is that we're like, oh, we don't have to be that, right? It's not like where it's like you are a low red, you have to be that,
right.
Where it's like so.
This is your purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't frame it that way.
We don't frame it that way, but it's like. But can someone who is an equivalent to a red in our society rise to be a gold? The answer is probably in most cases no,
Which is really sad.
It's really sad, yeah. And so it's almost like this typecast that they have it's saying out loud the quiet part.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Yep.
It's putting a name to like maybe some things that already kind of exist. And I could definitely see how I think humans who are in power hold on to power, and they create systems to hold on to power.
Yes.
And I could definitely see how it like this is playing out a typecast system, a caste society to its extreme. I think in if human society exists 400 years from now or 800 years or whatever, where we are conquering our own solar system, I don't know. I feel like we could get there.
I think that was a fantastic answer. I really
Gold star for Dalton.
Yeah, gold star for Dalton. Suck it, Nick. I have in my notes an answer to this question is regrettably yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's not as explicit as it is in the books,
Right.
but it's a very much a metaphorical comparison.
Yeah.
And it's not fair.
Right.
It's not happy. But I think that this is one of the things that I love about fiction is that it's able to take real life challenges that we have and put it into a story that we can know and read and understand.
Yeah.
And so, sadly, yes.
Right.
I do think that it is. And I think that in 400 years when we are, making our way to Mars and Jupiter and all of these other things, planets.
Yeah, they have names, planets and moons.
Yeah, I know most of them.
A solid, I don't know, 6.
Yeah, over half. That does the scope of humanity as we start to grow and expand in the worlds that we know, does it get easier to typecast people?
Yeah, for sure. Especially like when they need efficiency, right? That's what the genetic modification is trying to achieve, right? It's saying we need people who are really blues, who are really good at integrating with technology. Greens are the same, right? We need yellows who are just like who are masters of understanding the human body and healing, right? Do we really need pinks? Probably not. That's a little fucked up. But
probably not. Yeah.
But they have like violets dedicated to like art and culture. Like that inherently that sounds like a really good thing. Then you realize they go to a school where they are like pumped full of psychedelics and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
All of a sudden like this thing that sounded good, you can see the implications of it and it's like, oh, I don't like that. That's messed up.
I don't like that.
I don't like that at all. So how does like human society at its extreme several hundred years in the future achieve efficiency when biomodifications sound like reasonable at that technology level? Like it feels like I would want to have a biomodification to make me better at and more efficient at my job. How do we do that without typecasting people, without losing freedom? Something that feels really important and feels like a core part of human nature. How do we do that without oppression? And I don't know. I think the book puts into perspective that this could definitely be attainable and achievable if that was gone about in the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is probably one of, if not the heaviest topic discussions we've had.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
I think it's really interesting, and I do want to talk about it. Right, like I want to talk about it on our Discord or other places. Let's talk about this, and I'm interested to see what people think. Like, is this a realistic setting?
Yeah.
Do you think that Red Rising is an amplification of what we currently see today in our society?
Yeah. Or do you think that when we got to that point that it would be fixed somehow? Like we wouldn't get to that extreme. I would be interested to hear that. Yeah.
Do we create technology so that everybody is a gold, right? Like, do we have it so that everybody can reap the benefits of society? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting topic. I'm interested to see what people have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about it. The best place to do that is on our Discord. So you can find our Discord. It's linked in the show notes. It's also on our website, which is fantasyandsomeflights.com, which is where you can find the show notes, which is going to link to Lauren's YouTube channel, who did the song at the beginning, as well as Stonemaier Games, who's putting out Red Rising and everything. The second best place to connect with us is going to be Instagram. Anything else from your end?
That's it for me.
It was awesome talking with you.
I
love this book. I'm really
it.
excited to read through the rest of the series.
Right, it's the natural. Just go through the rest of it.
Yep, which I said I was going to do with Mistborn. So
you got a lot of reading to do.
Yep, but it was great talking with you. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.